As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and obviously the thing that everyone is talking about and was talking about all throughout the weekend was the now unsealed indictment of former President Donald Trump from the Southern District of Florida and the DOJ surrounding the Mar-a-Lago documents controversy. And I think that we need to, at the outset of this discussion, and I'm going to have one of my favorite attorneys come on and break this down, who is a current criminal defense attorney, practices, in a lot of these areas, and also was a former assistant attorney general, really knows what he's talking about. We need to break this down so that you understand what is actually being alleged, what the government's case is, and then also what some potential defenses are, so that we can speak coherently and competently about this indictment from a legal analysis, not just a partisan political level. What you've seen in mainstream media mainly is just a love Trump or hate Trump sort of defense or pro-prosecution. And we need to drill down. But I think that we have to have this conversation in the context of understanding that Republicans and conservatives are rightly frustrated about the continued weaponization of government against conservatives and this two-tiered system of justice. And for those who are saying, this is a purely political prosecution, we're tired of President Trump getting harassed. If he's not the nominee, then it'll just be the next person that is targeted. Look at how the leftist Democrats in the Biden administration have targeted conservatives, targeted parents, targeted Christians. All of that is true. And I think that we need to have a conversation about the allegations of this particular indictment and the legal, because that is going to be the substantive discussion within the backdrop of the overall scope of being so frustrated with the continued persecution of Donald Trump. And I was there, all of you know. I mean, I stood with him and defended him, first impeachment, all the way through, until the end of my role and my tenure with him, which was when he left office. Then, of course, my role and my services were complete, and my representation concluded at that point. And so now I approach this as, purely a citizen and a legal analyst, and I want to be fair in terms of giving you the analysis, not just from a love Trump or hate Trump perspective, because I think that actually does a disservice to conservatives who are genuinely interested in understanding what is actually going on here. So for those who are approaching this episode with, either some kind of bias from my perspective, that either I'm going to approach this just wholeheartedly defending Trump because I used to be his counsel, or because I'm wholeheartedly anti-Trump now because I'm objective and I no longer work for him, both of those are false, because my role now is not to be one of his lawyers. And as one of his lawyers, and obviously you have a legal and ethical obligation to zealously defend your client. And that's what his lawyers are and should be doing. But in this particular case, now that I am removed from that and am speaking just as a private citizen looking at this, and with obviously legal training and an analysis here, I want to be as objective as possible in terms of approaching what is actually going on, what we know so far, and we don't know everything, what the indictment looks like, but also recognize that we are approaching this with the wider backdrop of everything that has gone before. So if you are approaching this really frustrated at the weaponization of government, wholeheartedly dissenting against this, I hear you, I understand that, and I agree with you. And I think that it is imperative and even more important that you hear the legal analysis of what is actually being alleged, so that you can more competently converse and understand what is actually happening to our rule of law and our civil society and our justice system. So with that, We will be joined by my good friend, Mike Melito, who is an attorney in my former home state of Colorado, right after this, and you're not going to want to miss it.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to your to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
So joining me now to break all of this down and actually talk about the legal of the Trump indictment, which is the second indictment. I was actually calling it an impeachment earlier in a conversation with a friend, and it's like, what are we even doing here? There are so many things that are just attacking President Trump. But putting the political aside for a moment and just talking about the legal is my good friend, Mike Melito, who is an attorney in Colorado. He's a criminal defense attorney, former assistant attorney general and JAG officer, and a good and longtime mentor of mine, sometimes lawyer of mine as well. And he joins me for this episode to break it down. So, Mike, thanks so much.
Oh, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive into this first of all, because a lot of what I've seen in the commentary over the weekend on mainstream media and kind of the two camps are really, if you love President Trump, then all of this is totally just political. This has no teeth. There's absolutely nothing here except a political sham. And then if you hate President Trump, it's the complete opposite. And this is the most damning thing that has come out in the history of all indictments ever. And he's the worst criminal that has ever existed on the face of the planet. And, we kind of go from there. So I want to actually talk about genuinely what these 37 counts are, 38 if you can include the alleged co-conspirator, and what the government is actually alleging in what we called a speaking indictment.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we have this very simple principle that extends, or very simple set of facts, I should say, that extends to the first 31 of these charges. And that is that President Trump and a bunch of his staff held onto a variety of classified documents at varying degrees of, I'll say, classified security levels. He held onto these documents past the time he was president, and moreover, he did so, transported them, transmitted them, gave them over to people that shouldn't have had access to them, and then also stored them in an unsecure place at his home in Mar-a-Lago. So that's the crux of it. And then what it does is I will say, transitions into a obstruction of justice, or a set of facts revolving around the obstruction of justice, where they accuse President Trump of having misled his lawyers, having conspired with an employee to hide the documents after having received a production request from the government in the form of an SDT, otherwise known as a subpoena. So as the grand jury had subpoenaed him, the government alleges he then went out of his way to conspire with others to hide the fact that he had maintained these classified documents.
So, okay, so then top level, what you're saying, and I've read this indictment as well, is basically to contrast this from some of the other conduct that Republicans and Trump supporters are turning to say, well, look, former Vice President Mike Pence had classified documents. President Biden, when he was the VP, had classified documents for 10 years. And, why aren't they being indicted? Well, at least as far as we know and the facts have come out, and we're assuming the facts to be true for purposes of this conversation, they, when those documents were found, immediately turned them over when there was a request. And so we're not talking in this indictment about possession of classified documents as the crime being alleged. It's what President Trump did in terms of his response and his conduct with his interactions with the Justice Department after NARA, the National Archives, and then eventually the FBI and DOJ got involved in asking for the return of government documents. Is that right?
Spot on. I mean, it's the equivalent of, you've got something you shouldn't, it's brought to your attention, and certain, the other folks you mentioned, they purportedly gave the materials back immediately or as soon as possible. In this particular case, the DOJ, through their indictment, paints a picture of President Trump thumbing his nose at the Justice Department and the grand jury to hand back the documents when he otherwise should have.
Yeah. So this, I mean, if Elon Musk were tweeting about this would be a hashtag FAFO, basically, right? Where we'll, for the Salem audience, we'll say mess around and find out. But that's if any of you have seen that graph, as much as you want to mess around, then that is inversely proportionate to how much you find out, right? And so really, this is an indictment of the Department of Justice saying, and what Bill Barr has articulated as well, that President Trump was kind of jerking around the Justice Department and basically saying, I don't care what you're telling me, I can do what I want. And they're now saying, well, no, you can't, and here is why. And so let's talk about the elements of this from a legal perspective and how substantive this really is, because my immediate pushback, if I'm the defense attorney here, would be like, okay, well, so he jerked him around and he gave them back kind of in batches, and maybe wasn't fully forthcoming or whatever. But does that really rise to the level of criminal conduct? Because there are things that we could all say, all right, you could have done better, but thankfully not everything rises to the level of actual criminal activity. So where's the standard here?
So here, what we're looking at is having these documents. He gets the warning via the subpoena, and the subpoena says, hey, turn over these documents. Well, he doesn't. And in fact, he makes the leap and goes so far as to deceive his own attorneys when the attorneys sign essentially the records custodian document saying, I'm the records custodian, I've done some manner of search, or someone has informed me about the search was done, it was diligent and appropriate, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole can of worms in and of itself for other reasons. But with the underlying 31 counts, you have the government laying out each and every document, or what I would assume is a packet of documents or multiple documents. They lay it out in groups, and those groups have a pretty big significance to the security and safety of our country. So with that in mind, that's where the DOJ in their indictment jumps into the part where President Trump's colleague, or I should say in this case, co-conspirator, start the process of tampering with this evidence and effectively trying to obstruct justice. And the sequence in which the DOJ lays out in this indictment, they have bits of information that relate to text messaging. Timing is important throughout this. And they also claim to have videotapes where that shows the co-conspirator moving the boxes, and it was timed in such a fashion so as to trick the lawyers. And that leads to, if you're all right with me jumping into it, that leads to the part about attorney-client privilege and how it gets pierced in this case. So,
which is actually really fascinating, and this is why I was actually asking a few of my colleagues over the course of the weekend, because we've seen former President Trump's former attorney, Parla Toreg, on kind of on this media tour, and it's really because attorney-client privilege was pierced. They found that a judge found a crime fraud exception, and so I kind of saw it as more of a CYA tour for him to say, here's why I'm not being targeted, and so before we get into the meat of that, I want to go back really quick though on one thing that's really important, because there's been a lot of conversation in the media, and I think from people who rightly are trying to defend President Trump, and they're suggesting that, well, if these documents were not classified, then it wasn't illegal for him to possess them. But my understanding of the law and also of this indictment is that it's not so much whether or not they're classified. That's actually immaterial. It's that they are government documents that are not his. So basically property of the government that the government is asking for him to return. And once he's notified of that, he has a legal obligation. And when you and I, Mike, were talking about this earlier, you actually gave me a parallel of another story that was actually something that you dealt with. And I don't know if this was on the prosecution or the defense side, but about a mom of a college student who, and so go into that story and why this is kind of a parallel example.
Absolutely. So the case that I was involved in prosecuting actually revolved around a whole bunch of young men who were stealing from the Apple store. Now, as we all know, your Apple devices have the ability to communicate on the internet, and they do so with Apple. So when the computers were stolen, as soon as you boot those computers up, they check in with Apple, and Apple communicates with the computer. And Apple, of course, has a system that logs whether or not that computer was actually purchased and by whom. And it also, as part of that, has the ability to know if a computer had been stolen. So simply put, the young men who were involved in this bigger conspiracy wound up trying to get rid of their hot merchandise. They tried to sell it on the internet. Well, in the case as it developed, a mom of a college student had purchased off of Craigslist one of these hot computers. And as soon as her daughter logs in, the computer reports itself to Apple. Apple cross-references that in its system and realizes, heck, this is one of those computers that was stolen in a break-in. So Apple reports to local police, local authorities go out to the mom, and they say, hey, mom, unfortunately, we've got some bad news for you. The computer that you just bought for your daughter was stolen. So instead of handing it over and realizing, gee willikers, this isn't my property, the mom becomes indignant and says, nope, I bought it. And the police says, yes, we understand you bought it, but now that you know it's stolen, it's your duty to return it. And the mom essentially slammed the door in the face of the cops and said, I'm not giving it back to you. Well, guess what? At that point, mom now knows that there's something wrong with the computer. In other words, it's stolen property. And as we've all probably heard in television movies, possession of stolen property is a crime. So mom, separate and apart from the organized crime that I was prosecuting, the mom then gets in trouble with local authorities and is prosecuted for possession of stolen property. So similarly, the parallel here is that once President Trump is on notice of you've got someone else's property, he's got to return it. So that's an important component. And that, of course, it didn't happen right away. And that, I think jumps back to your lovely comment of mess around and find out.
Right. And obviously in this parallel situation, having a computer, buying one off Craigslist is generally not at all criminal activity. And even being a what the law would call a bona fide purchaser, meaning, this person didn't have knowledge that that they were receiving or buying stolen property until law enforcement told them. And then at that point is when the duty kicks in. And so for people saying, well, President Trump thought he declassified it, or these were declassified documents, or these were his personal property. What, at least assuming that the facts in the indictment, just for purposes of this conversation, are accurate, this isn't his personal property, even if he thought it was. Once he's notified that the National Archives and the government is saying, no, you have to give this back, this is our property, at that point, that's when the duty is triggered. And so then, if, as the indictment alleges, there are steps taken to not only conceal the property, but to mislead the FBI and DOJ, move these boxes around so that they can't access them, which then gives rise to this conspiracy charge, that's really the substance of what we're talking about. So I think that there's a lot of kind of ancillary discussions that are going on in the media that aren't really relevant to the criminal charges as set forth in the indictment. And I think that is really important. So then let's move on to this crime fraud exception, because as you very well laid out, Mike, there was a judge that found the crime fraud exception. So now that has pierced attorney-client privilege. And so how did that unfold, at least in the report and in the indictment, and what is the crime fraud exception, and how does that impact this indictment in this case moving forward?
So this all roots in one of the oldest privileges around that we have in this country, and it goes back to common law, certainly, and that's the attorney-client privilege. The common person, your listener, and attorneys throughout the world are going to know the attorney-client privilege as that famed phrase, meaning whatever I tell my attorney is sacrosanct, and it's going into the vault and never coming out. So in most situations, if someone were to walk in my office and say, "Hey, Mr. Melito, I'm in a bit of trouble. I think I may have killed someone," that's all past tense, right? That's in the past. I can analyze the case with the person, no matter the level of legal wrongdoing that they committed. So it's all backwards facing as they are seeking my advice. However, when one of the noted exceptions, and I will say historic exceptions as well, is something we attorneys refer to as the crime fraud exception that you've said a couple times now. And what that is a little bit more forward facing. So when an attorney, let's say, is called by a client, and in contrast, the client is saying, "Hey, Mr. Melito, I have a dead body in my trunk. What should I do with it?" Well, I'm not allowed to advise them as to future crime. I'm not allowed to allow them to use my advice to go and commit a future crime, like burying the body, destruction of evidence. Okay, they can ask me things along the lines of, "Hey, if I did this in the future, is this legal?" That's fine. But when an attorney gets used as a tool of the fraud, all of those statements that were previously made to the attorney no longer get the protections of the famed attorney-client privilege. Now here, in this case, what we have in the indictment, and again, assuming it's true, what we appear to have is this description of attorney number 1, attorney number 2, and attorney number 3. Now, attorney number 2 is a little bit of a placeholder in the story, so not really relevant for this conversation right now. But attorney number 1 appears to be this attorney by the name of Evan Corcoran, or Cochran, however you pronounce his last name. But the attorney had met with President Trump, had received the subpoena on behalf of President Trump, and then went about his duty to fulfill his duty to, on behalf of President Trump, work with the Department of Justice to return these documents to the DOJ or FBI, whoever the handler of the documents was going to be. And that attorney then grabbed another attorney who, in the story that is the indictment, we believe attorney number 3 happens to be Christina Bobb, another one of President Trump's former attorneys. And so her role is to serve as a records custodian and a person who verifies in response to that subpoena that President Trump had received. She would then go and verify that the search was diligent, the search was appropriate, and the results, in other words, the resulting documents that are handed over to the federal government are complete. And that's where the indictment itself points out that President Trump had conspired with an aide, and that's the co-conspirator that's listed in the indictment, that President Trump actually maneuvered his aide to carry boxes, take them outside of an area, and transport them in a fashion so that Trump's attorney number 1, Evan Cochran, can not find the classified documentation. So that was considered a deceit he employed upon his own attorney, who in turn, because apparently, you can sort of see the inference here, or the implication in the indictment, that Evan Cochran was then to hand over the documents, and then Christina Bobb was to verify that it was in fact a full and complete quantity of classified documents that should have been turned over. So that deceit and tricking his own lawyers really just throws out the specter of the crime fraud exception. And that is where you see the very unusual commentary within the indictment, which is actually a reference to the attorney's notes. So, crime fraud exception allowed the Department of Justice to go to a judge and say, look at this evidence we have, and because we are seeing that the attorney was used to as a tool to deceive the government to commit a crime, Your Honor, we're requesting an order that you allow us to breach the attorney-client privilege. And guess what? That was granted. And the text of that, the notes of that attorney, as President Trump sat and asked questions and gave a variety of commands, the notes of that attorney was just laid bare to the Department of Justice. And you see it sitting there smack dab in the middle of the indictment.
And this is where you're right that typically, and I think everybody's response to this is attorney-client privilege is generally sacrosanct, but there are these exceptions like crime fraud, and of course the next most obvious question is that a standard ruling that, and you said, raises the specter of the crime fraud exception. And so was this, in your opinion, just based on what we know, a reasonable application of that exception rather than, for example, politically motivated?
Well, that's a bigger picture for the politically motivated part. That's a bigger picture thing for a jury to decide. But coming back to that crime fraud exception, if you were to fast forward in trial, you have to imagine that this jury is sitting there listening to Trump's attorney, who would get on the stand and say, he asked me these questions with the expectation of this never coming to light. He asked me these questions with the understanding that his questions, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how inappropriate, or no matter how righteous, they are now going to be exposed to the world, and they're going to be exposed in this proceeding. And but believe it or not, this is such a rare event. In my nearly 25 years of practice, I think that's what the number is now. I saw that happen once, where a defendant had to blame tried to blame his attorney for bad advice. And once that defendant got on the stand and said, this attorney gave me bad advice, that's why I committed the crime, guess what? The attorney promptly got up and said, I'm sorry, but that's not exactly what was said. These are the following things that were said. And of course, it just spot on contradicted the claims of that defendant. And fast forward a little bit, and the jury finds him completely guilty. So here you have Cochran in this incredibly awkward position, where he's going to be called and he will be the witness that points the finger and say, yep, this was supposed to be an entirely private conversation. And yep, President Trump was led to believe that I would never reveal what he said to me out in the open. That's going to be a tough road for whoever becomes President Trump's defense counsel. Now, that said, they might be able to knock it out on motion, on a pretrial motion. But that's different from if it makes itself if it makes its way into the eyes and ears of a jury. That's hard. That is very hard to overcome.
Yeah, and so that's a perfect segue, Mike Melito, into the process, because this is going to take a while, and then I want to get into some of the defenses that might be raised in some of those pretrial motions and even at trial, because we've been talking a lot about just laying out the government's case and what, assuming again for this conversation that the facts that are alleged are true, which obviously the DOJ and the government is responsible at trial to prove each and every element beyond a reasonable doubt. And President Trump, like any other American citizen, has the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty at trial or accept some sort of plea agreement. And so the process here, he's going tomorrow to the Southern District of Florida for the initial appearance. And then, what happens next in terms of the process? And I mean, this doesn't happen quickly. And so I think that this is going to be for good or bad, and it may be good for fundraising, bad for popularity. I mean, good and bad politically, but for good or for bad, I think this is going to have a cloud over the primary season, at least for the next, year, if not more, until this is resolved.
Oh, no doubt. And neither you nor I have a crystal ball, but just kind of generally speaking, and you've heard the phrase countless times, the wheels of justice move slowly. So the next process, or at least the next important process after President Trump appears in court, is the part at when essentially the government is going to be required to hand over the discovery. And discovery, as I think just about everybody in podcast land knows, is the amount of paper that the government has. It's the audio, it's the video, it's all of the evidence, it's all of the things that law enforcement has gathered in one way, shape, or form. So as a defense counsel, once you receive it, the next thing you engage in is making sure you have a big enough team to handle what is likely to be terabytes upon terabytes of discovery. You hire private investigators and the like, and then you start digging through the discovery. You interact with your client or representatives of your client that might have further information, and you, like a surgeon, even though your client may tell you, here's the facts from my perspective, you take that into account, but you look at the whole entire mess of evidence. And I mean mess, because there's going to be a lot of data. You comb through it, and then you see what jumps out at you as plausible defenses. And I believe that's going to segue into your next question.
Yeah. And so let's move forward into that next part then.
Great. So taking a look at this, and again, like you said, taking the facts portrayed in the indictment as absolute truth. You look at this and you say, all right, we have statements in here that President Trump makes to reporters. The purpose of the statements he makes to reporters is twofold. You have the campaign trail statement to reporters, if you will, and that's to show that President Trump has knowledge. He has an understanding that classified materials, whatever their level of classification, needs to be safeguarded and needs to be taken care of in an appropriate fashion. So migrate to the comments to the reporters. The comments to the reporters purport to be, hey, this is classified. I know it's still classified. I could have declassified it back when I was president, but I didn't. And then there is what I perceive as a, hey, other reporter or other person, keep your distance. I have this map, or I have this other highly classified series of documents. I don't want you to be able to read them, but you can look at them from a distance and realize that these are important classified documents. So what does that do? That contradicts the storyline that has been put out, that President Trump has already declassified them and merely hung on to copies of now declassified documents, and there is
personal documents as well. I mean,
yes,
like somebody, I think any reasonable person, and certainly if you were a former sitting president, would see, things that were formerly classified as not, personal records, for example, like things like a diary or notes, like
right.
what we just referred to from an attorney. Yeah.
Right. And he's somehow claiming ownership, maybe because there's writings on it. Who knows? We don't have enough information to determine that, of course, just by looking at the indictment. But there are hints in there of possible avenues of defense. And so with that in mind, the first piece that jumps out is you worry about contradictions as a defense lawyer. You worry about inconsistent statements, because when you go to trial, I can assure you that the government is going to take any inconsistent statements, and like a child that changes their story, who is fibbing to you as a parent, they're going to portray it the exact same way. President Trump's inconsistent statements, his statements that don't line up with objective facts, it's a lie, it's covering up a crime. Those are all indicators of a mens rea, which is, again, attorney fancy speak for a guilty mind. So what do you do here as a defense counsel? You try to create or look and find evidence. You can find potential future arguments. And in this particular set of circumstances, you could say, well, it's well known that President Trump has a distaste for mainstream media. Maybe those people in his presence that the Department of Justice cites in its indictment, maybe they were part of that mainstream media and he was trolling them. And that's something I've said before. You can portray that as, I loathe these people. I detest them. I'm actually being consistent. I was pulling their leg to show how the entire system, the Biden administration is corrupt. He's manipulated DOJ. And I'm just exposing this horrible underbelly of the government. So that's thing number one that jumps out at you. And that's a defense. And maybe that convinces a jury or a juror amongst the jury, and it gets you some sort of compromise or some sort of not guilty verdict. So that's part one. As far as the conspiracy piece, you attack that along those same lines. So that conspiracy to obstruct justice, that conspiracy to hold on to these documents when they shouldn't have been, that is what becomes absolutely fascinating, because you turn it into a house of cards by saying that documents weren't classified. And when those documents weren't classified, it really pulls out that bottom row of cards and everything else crumbles, because you can't have a conspiracy to essentially withhold non-classified documents. And you could say, hey, you know what? We handed over everything that was classified, but we held on to what wasn't. Therefore, we did respond. We did respond truthfully. We responded properly. And my use of the lawyers was not deceitful. It was actually just following the letter of what you asked for in the subpoena. So those are some avenues for defenses. Now, the other component too is I can tell your listeners that the discovery, in other words, the FBI reports, the other governmental agency reports, we have just a scratching of the surface revealed in this indictment. We don't know how many of these witnesses have changed their stories time and again. We don't know if there's going to be a story that just they told that fits the narrative of what the agent or governmental investigating agent was looking for, and therefore they honed in on it and grabbed it and sort of didn't do their due diligence in seeing if the person who they interviewed as a witness was consistent, and honest and straightforward. So there's a lot of work to be done. You know, I think I would caution any listener, whether you're a fan of President Trump or not, is just realize this is the tip of the iceberg. And there is so much underlying information that we should not rush to judgment.
Yeah, and I think
yeah.
Yeah, I think allowing the system to play out and to see everything that actually can be proven versus defenses and potentially pretrial motions and substantive things that will come out further. I think a lot of people are jumping to conclusions again just based on their political perspective. But how much then can that be used as a defense at trial? I mean, it's not a complete defense like for example, saying here's my alibi. I wasn't there at the scene of the crime, so therefore that is a defense. You got the wrong person, for example. I mean, this is more as you've described it as a jury nullification defense that may actually work, though, to say, well, this is just the DOJ targeting me, President Trump, because they have some kind of political agenda, and this is Biden going after his political opponent. I mean, is that I anticipate that will be raised in some fashion, if not in the defense's case in chief. But how effective could that be as a defense? Legally, not politically.
Right, yeah. Legally, it absolutely could happen. I have seen it. I have heard tales of it. And, the way that would unfold here goes really back to, dare I say, jury selection. So by the time, and this will not be for a while, this would be a year or 2 years, maybe out, you have this point where you conduct, as an attorney, you conduct voir dire. And what that means is you have a panel of jurors. It's many, many people who come in. Maybe they're pre-screened for their biases so that you hope you get a neutral juror. They come in, and you might, as a defense counsel, you might be able to find certain components of information out about a prospective juror that maybe they have a distrust for government. Maybe they're a huge fan of President Trump. Maybe there's something else lingering that causes them to just be a good old-fashioned skeptic. And here, advance that to the point where the evidence comes out and President Trump's defense attorneys, either through cross-examination or after the government concludes its case and they start putting on their own witnesses and their own evidence, they're able to demonstrate this disparate treatment and that things look so unfair to President Trump in light of past transgressions by high-ranking government officials, the Hillary Clintons, the then Vice President Joe Biden, then Vice President Mike Pence, and the Clinton sock drawer, I believe, is another story along those lines. But you look at this, and maybe as a juror, you just become so irate, you forget about the deceit, or maybe you don't believe the deceit that the government was trying to pitch. And instead, you just say, you know what? This smells funny. I don't like it. This looks like a political attack. And the court system should not be used to try to take away someone's liberty based upon political attacks. And they might vote not guilty. That might cause reasonable doubt. And so that's huge. I think, and of course, this is really speculative, and I don't have a crystal ball, and I certainly don't have the discovery in front of me, but this might be a possible avenue at this point in time.
Right. And I think that that's, at least from what we've seen from some of his still current attorneys that, of course, are carrying, messaging for him and representing their client well, and are, talking about his defenses already in the media, are really going down that road. I think, and if I can, speculate, for a couple of reasons, probably because not only are they laying that foundation to then articulate and defend that in a legal context, but especially in the court of public opinion. And I think that it plays definitely even better as a defense in the court of public opinion. And what we've seen in terms of the fundraising for Trump's campaign, we've seen in terms of some of the poll numbers that have gone up even after this indictment. President Trump has certainly situated himself in the media saying, listen, they want to get after you, all of these other groups that are targeted, like, parents who've been put on government watch lists just because they show up at their children's school board meetings, pastors in churches who care about pro-life issues. I mean, all of these other conservatives and Republicans and individuals that are targeted from a weaponized government. Then he's saying, listen, they're trying to get to me just because I'm in the way of the government ultimately getting to you. And I think it is very effective. And there's a lot of truth to that as well, that we've seen a weaponized system, and certainly everything that has come out with, Crossfire Hurricane, and all of this other stuff with the FISA court. I think that the general public has a right to be frustrated and absolutely incensed with how there is a double standard and there shouldn't be, and whether or not that then translates to this particular indictment and what comes out in court, I think it remains to be seen. And this is why it's so important that we go through the legal of this and not just have the top level court of public opinion sort of conversations to be in a love or hate Trump posture, because that ultimately doesn't drill down into what the legal is. And I think that what a lot of the Trump supporting advocates are hoping is that that will be enough to just say, listen, it doesn't matter what is alleged. The political persecution and the harassment of President Trump in, within the two impeachments when he was in office, all of the stuff that came out with Spygate, Crossfire Hurricane, all of that, it ultimately, in our opinion, just doesn't even matter what's alleged in the indictment. We don't want you coming after him anyway. And I think that is really effective in the court of public opinion. But ultimately, I think that we as conservatives and certainly as Christians need to pray that due process is achieved here, that President Trump is not wrongly targeted or convicted, that due process does play out, and also that we have a justice system that is truly just and isn't just along the lines of whatever's popular in the polls or the court of public opinion. So, Mike Melito, I really appreciate your thoughts on this. And so kind of closing thoughts, anything we didn't cover that you think is really important for people to know, or what's kind of your final synopsis, at least as to right now. And obviously there will be so much more that comes out that we'll talk about as the case progresses and things continue.
I think we just have to keep an open mind, and we have to wait for the facts to come to light. That's going to be something that happens in the jury. So again, we shouldn't rush to judgment, because at the end of the day, this is the kind of thing that will forever be in our history books.
Yeah, really well said. It's certainly unprecedented. And, I saw a meme the other day that said, we're always in unprecedented times. I really wish we could go back to some precedented times. And I think we can all, yes, I think we can all hope for that. So Mike Melito, thanks so much. I really appreciate your time today, breaking all of this down for us.
And thank you.
With inflation, the banking world collapse, and everything that Joe Biden is doing not to protect America, you need to make sure to secure your financial health, especially in retirement. And hey, if you're a millennial like me, that actually is sooner than you think. You need to start now, even if you are a millennial or a Gen Zer, to make sure that your financial health is actually healthy when we get to retirement. And Legacy Precious Metals has a revolutionary new online platform that allows you to invest in gold and silver online in real time. In a few easy steps, you can open an account online, select your metals of choice, and choose to have them stored in a vault or shipped right to your door. You'll have access to a dashboard where you can track your portfolio growth in real time anytime. You'll see transparent pricing on each coin and bar, and this puts you in complete control of your money. The platform is free to sign up for. Visit legacypminvestments.com and open your account and see this new investing platform for yourself. Gold hedges against inflation and against a volatile stock market. A truly diversified portfolio isn't just more stocks and bonds, but different asset classes. This brand new platform allows you to make investments in in gold and silver, no matter how small or large, with just a few clicks. Visit legacypm.com to get started. You can download the free investor's guide, and you can also call Legacy PM Investments to talk to a portfolio expert to get expert answers to to customize your personal portfolio. So visit legacypminvestments.com to get started. Tell them that Jenna sent you.
Have you ever picked up a towel set because it felt so soft in the store, but then when you leave and you go to use it, it's not really that absorbent? It's basically a towel that is leaving you out to dry. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels that actually work. I know, it's totally mind-blowing. Towels that actually dry you. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, and 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors. I have the sage green and the white. I love them. And right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 with promo code Jenna. That's JENNA. So go to mypillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners special. MyPillow products come with a 10-year warranty and have a 60-day money-back guarantee. So to receive this amazing offer on the 6-piece towel set of MyPillow towels, just go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener special, and enter promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, or call 1-800-564-8475. That's mypillow.com, promo code Jenna.